A pregnant black woman enters a high-end clinic expecting the best care, but instead she's ignored, while white patients are quickly ushered in. As her water breaks and contractions begin, the receptionist coldly demands $1,000 up front, despite her medical emergency. What they don't know. They will soon pay for this. What happens when the system decides your worth based on money and skin color? Before we dive into this, let us know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. Amira Johnson had spent 4 months meticulously researching the perfect place to welcome her first child into the world. After reading hundreds of reviews, consulting with friends who had given birth at various facilities, and even visiting 7 different clinics, Harbor Women's Health emerged as the undisputed choice. The clinic's stellar reputation for exceptional care, their state-of-the-art birthing suites that resembled luxury hotel rooms, and Dr. Richard Sloan's internationally renowned expertise in high-risk pregnancies made it worth every penny she and her husband Darius had saved over the past year. At 37 weeks pregnant, Amira felt a complex mix of excitement, nervousness, and pure joy as she approached the gleaming glass entrance on this crisp Tuesday morning in October. The autumn light reflected off the crystal chandeliers in the lobby, and the scent of fresh orchids filled the air. Everything about Harbor Women's Health whispered of a place where money was no object when it came to bringing new life into the world. Exactly what she wanted for her precious baby. "This is it, little one," she whispered lovingly to her unborn child, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "The absolute best place for you to make your grand entrance into this world. Mama chose this place just for you. After months of research, nothing but the best for my baby." The waiting room was a masterpiece of interior design, with Italian marble floors, hand-selected artwork, and seating that felt more like a high-end spa than a medical facility. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, and the lighting was perfectly calibrated to be both calming and flattering. About 15 other expectant mothers were scattered throughout the space, all dressed in expensive maternity clothes that spoke of comfortable lives and unlimited healthcare options. Amira settled into a plush leather chair that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary and immediately struck up a friendly conversation with Jennifer, a well-dressed blonde woman about her age who was also waiting for her appointment. Jennifer was wearing what appeared to be a designer maternity dress and carried a handbag that Amira recognized as costing several $1,000s. "This is my 3rd time here," Jennifer said warmly, adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet. "Dr. Sloan delivered both my daughters, and I'm back for number 3. The care here is absolutely extraordinary. It's like giving birth in a 5-star resort." "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear," Amira replied, her eyes bright with anticipation. "I've been planning this for months. Everything I've read says this is the absolute gold standard for maternal care in the entire region." "Oh, it absolutely is. The nurses are like angels, the facilities are beyond luxurious, and Dr. Sloan is simply phenomenal. He's delivered babies for celebrities, politicians, you name it. You really made the perfect choice." As they chatted about pregnancy experiences, birth plans and nursery preparations, Amira began to observe the intricate dance of the clinic's operations. She watched as Claire Thompson, the impeccably dressed blonde receptionist behind the mahogany desk, managed the steady flow of patients with what appeared to be effortless professionalism. When a woman in a floor-length mink coat arrived 30 minutes late for her appointment, Claire's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Mrs. Vanderbilt, don't you worry about being late, darling. Traffic can be such a nightmare. Dr. Sloan specifically asked me to fit you in whenever you arrived." The woman was immediately whisked away to the back without any mention of paperwork, insurance verification, or the significant delay. Just 15 minutes later, when a young Latina woman approached the desk with her insurance card and a folder of meticulously organized paperwork, Claire's demeanor shifted dramatically. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold professional mask. "I'm sorry, but our computer system is showing some significant verification issues with your insurance provider," Claire said without even glancing at the documents. "You'll need to have a seat while we spend some time sorting this out with your provider." Amira watched this pattern repeat itself over the next hour with growing unease that made her stomach churn. White patients, especially those whose clothing and accessories screamed wealth and privilege, glided through the check-in process with warm smiles, immediate attention, and what appeared to be red carpet treatment. But patients of color faced inexplicable delays, additional questions about their insurance coverage, requests for supplementary documentation, and what seemed like deliberately created administrative obstacles. "That's really strange," Jennifer murmured, having noticed the same disturbing pattern. "I've been coming here for over 4 years, and I've never seen them have so many computer problems with insurance verification. Usually everything runs like absolute clockwork. They're famous for their efficiency." "I'm starting to wonder if it's really about computer problems," Amira replied quietly, her voice heavy with the realization she desperately didn't want to accept. When Amira's 10 o'clock appointment time arrived, she approached the reception desk with confidence, carrying her insurance card and pre-authorization paperwork in a professional leather portfolio. She had spent an hour the previous evening calling both her insurance provider and the clinic to triple-check that everything was properly verified and ready for her appointment. "Good morning," she said with genuine warmth, placing her immaculate documents on the polished marble counter. "I have a 10 o'clock appointment with Dr. Sloan." "Amira Johnson." Claire looked up from her computer screen, and Amira immediately felt the temperature in the room drop by 20 degrees. The warm, effusive smile that had greeted every white patient disappeared completely, replaced by a cold, assessing stare that made Amira feel like she was being evaluated for worthiness. "Medicaid," Claire said flatly, holding Amira's insurance card between two perfectly manicured fingers, as if it were contaminated with something contagious. "Yes, but everything has been thoroughly pre-approved and verified multiple times. I have all the authorization paperwork right here, including direct confirmation from Dr. Sloan's office that my coverage is fully accepted." Amira opened her portfolio to display the documents she had organized with the precision of a legal brief. Claire didn't even pretend to look at the paperwork. Instead, she turned to her computer and began typing with theatrical slowness, her fingers moving across the keyboard, as if each keystroke was causing her physical pain. "Our system is showing multiple red flags with your coverage," Claire announced after her performance. "There appear to be significant gaps in your authorization that weren't apparent during the initial scheduling." "Red flags." "I spoke with both my insurance company and your office yesterday, and everyone confirmed that everything was properly authorized and ready to proceed." "Medicaid cases are notoriously complicated," Claire replied, her tone suggesting that this complication was entirely Amira's fault for having the audacity to use government insurance. "These programs often have last-minute changes, coverage reversals, or authorization cancellations that don't show up in our system until we attempt to process the actual appointment." Amira returned to her seat feeling like she had been slapped in the face. The knot in her stomach was growing tighter with each passing minute as she watched the continuation of the pattern that was becoming impossible to ignore. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, Amira witnessed a masterclass in subtle discrimination. She watched as 4 more white patients who arrived after her were immediately called back for their appointments. One woman arrived 45 minutes late, apologizing profusely for a tennis lesson that ran long, but was immediately accommodated with Claire's brightest smile and most accommodating demeanor. But when a young black woman approached the desk with what appeared to be private insurance, Claire suddenly discovered system maintenance issues that would require additional time to resolve. When an elderly Hispanic gentleman arrived for what was clearly a consultation, Claire informed him that there had been a miscommunication about his appointment time and that he would need to reschedule. Jennifer was watching the same pattern unfold, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Amira, this really doesn't seem right. In all my years coming here, I've never seen anything like this. They're usually incredibly efficient and accommodating." "I don't think this has anything to do with efficiency," Amira replied, her voice barely above a whisper as the ugly truth became undeniable. When Jennifer's name was called for her appointment, she hesitated. "I don't feel right going back when you've been waiting so much longer." "Go ahead," Amira said with forced brightness. "Maybe by the time you're done, they'll have sorted out whatever imaginary problems they're having with my insurance." As Jennifer disappeared into the back offices, Amira was left alone with her growing anxiety and the increasingly obvious realization that she was being deliberately excluded from the care she had spent months planning and paying for. Another 30 minutes passed before Jennifer emerged from her appointment, her face flushed with satisfaction from what was clearly excellent medical care. But when she saw Amira still sitting in the waiting room, her expression immediately shifted to confusion and concern. "Amira, you're still here, what's going on?" Before Amira could respond, she heard Claire's voice rise above the ambient noise of the waiting room. Claire was speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, her voice carrying a tone of professional exasperation mixed with barely concealed disdain. "Ma'am, I've explained the situation multiple times," Claire was saying to thin air, since Amira was sitting across the room. "If you can't understand basic insurance verification procedures, perhaps you should consider seeking care at a facility more appropriate to your circumstances." Every head in the waiting room turned toward Claire, then toward Amira, creating a tableau of confusion and growing embarrassment. Claire was performing for an audience, making it appear as though Amira had been arguing with her or causing some kind of disturbance. "I haven't said anything to her," Amira said quietly to Jennifer, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "I've been sitting here the entire time." Claire continued her performance, her voice getting louder and more dramatic. "We simply cannot accommodate patients who become agitated and disruptive when asked to follow standard procedures. This is a professional medical facility, not a public clinic." The implication was clear and devastating. Claire was painting Amira as an unruly, difficult patient who was causing problems and disrupting the peaceful atmosphere of the clinic. Several patients were now staring at Amira with expressions ranging from curiosity to judgment, clearly wondering what she had done to deserve such public criticism. Jennifer's face flushed red with anger and indignation. "That's absolutely outrageous," she said, standing up from her chair. "You've been sitting here quietly the entire time. She's lying." Jennifer marched toward the reception desk with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. "Excuse me, but I was sitting right next to Mrs. Johnson, and she hasn't said a word to you. She's been waiting patiently for over an hour while you've processed multiple patients who arrived after her." Claire's expression shifted to one of practiced innocence, as if she couldn't imagine why anyone would question her version of events. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but I'm afraid you may not have been aware of all the interactions that took place while you were in your appointment. I was sitting right next to her until 5 minutes ago, and she hasn't moved from her seat or spoken to anyone except me," Jennifer said firmly. "What you just said about her being disruptive is completely false." "I'm sorry you feel that way," Claire replied with infuriating calm, "but we have protocols for handling difficult situations, and sometimes patients don't realize when their behavior is inappropriate." The room had gone completely silent except for the soft classical music that now seemed grotesquely cheerful given the tension that was building. Every person in the waiting room was watching the confrontation unfold, and Amira felt like she was trapped in a nightmare where she was being publicly humiliated for crimes she hadn't committed. That's when the first contraction hit like a bolt of lightning. Sharp, unmistakable, and far more intense than the practice contractions she had been experiencing for weeks, the pain cut across Amira's lower abdomen and radiated down her legs, causing her to gasp audibly and grip the arms of her chair. "Oh God," she whispered, her eyes widening with alarm as she recognized that this was different, this was real, this was the beginning of labor. The contraction lasted nearly 40 seconds, during which Amira's breathing became labored and sweat began to form on her forehead. When it finally subsided, she looked up to find every person in the waiting room staring at her with expressions of genuine concern. "Are you all right?" Jennifer asked, immediately moving to sit beside her. I think that was a real contraction," Amira said, her voice tight with pain and sudden fear. "I think I might actually be going into labor." Jennifer's expression immediately shifted to alarm. "We need to get you to a doctor right now." She turned toward the reception desk and called out loudly, "This woman is having contractions. She needs immediate medical attention." Claire looked up from her computer with an expression of mild annoyance, as if Jennifer was interrupting something far more important than a woman potentially going into labor. "Ma'am, as I've explained multiple times, we cannot provide services until the insurance verification process is complete," Claire said with maddening calm. "Insurance verification? She's in labor." "Alleged labor," Claire corrected with a smirk that made Amira's blood run cold. "Some patients will claim any kind of discomfort in order to bypass normal procedures." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Claire was suggesting that Amira was faking labor contractions to manipulate her way into receiving care. The implication was so outrageous, so deeply insulting, that several patients audibly gasped. "Are you suggesting she's lying about being in labor?" Jennifer asked, her voice rising with incredulity. I'm suggesting that we see this kind of theatrical behavior quite often with certain types of patients, Claire replied, her meaning unmistakable. They come in claiming emergencies when they haven't properly arranged payment, hoping to force our hand. Sarah Mitchell, a brunette woman in expensive clothes who had been quietly reading a magazine in the corner, looked up with sharp attention. Something about the exchange had triggered her instincts as someone who recognized injustice when she saw it. A second contraction hit Amira, stronger and longer than the first. This time she couldn't suppress a cry of pain that echoed through the silent waiting room. She doubled over, gripping Jennifer's hand so tightly that her knuckles went white. "That's definitely a real contraction," said an older woman sitting nearby who introduced herself as a retired labor and delivery nurse. "I've seen thousands of them, and that's not something you can fake." Claire's response was to roll her eyes dramatically. "Ma'am, I'm sure you mean well, but we have trained medical professionals here who can assess the situation appropriately." "Then get one of those trained medical professionals out here right now," Jennifer demanded. "Dr. Sloan is with actual patients who have properly arranged their care," Claire replied with venomous sweetness. "If this is truly a medical emergency, I suggest you call 911 or proceed to the nearest hospital emergency room." The third contraction was the strongest yet, lasting nearly a full minute and causing Amira to cry out in pain that was clearly genuine and intense. But instead of showing any concern or medical urgency, Claire's expression became even more dismissive and cruel. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your voice down," Claire said coldly. "You're disturbing our other patients with this performance." That word performance was the final straw for several people in the waiting room. The suggestion that a woman in obvious pain was putting on an act was so callous, so devoid of basic human compassion, that it galvanized the other patients into action. "This is absolutely disgusting," said a woman in a Chanel suit. "I've never seen anything so unprofessional in my life." "She's clearly in labor," added another patient. "How can you just sit there and do nothing?" "I'm documenting everything," announced Sarah, pulling out her phone and beginning to record. "This needs to be seen by everyone." Claire's face went pale when she saw the phone camera, but instead of backing down she doubled down on her cruelty. "Ma'am, you are not allowed to record in this facility. And I'm going to have to ask all of you to return to your seats and stop interfering with medical procedures." "What medical procedures?" Jennifer shouted. "You're not providing any medical care at all." That's when Victoria Thompson made her entrance. The head nurse had been monitoring the situation from her office, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. She emerged from the back offices like a practiced actress taking the stage, her crisp navy scrubs perfectly pressed, her graying hair pulled back in a professional bun, and her face wearing an expression of carefully calculated concern. Victoria had spent years perfecting the art of discrimination disguised as medical professionalism. Where Claire was obvious and crude in her prejudice, Victoria was subtle and sophisticated, using her nursing credentials and medical terminology to make racism sound like patient care. "What seems to be the situation here?" Victoria asked, her voice smooth and authoritative, carrying the weight of medical expertise. "This patient has been creating a disturbance because she's unable to meet our standard verification requirements," Claire said, immediately falling into the script Victoria had trained her to use. Victoria looked at Amira with what appeared to be genuine medical assessment, but her eyes were cold and calculating. She took in Amira's obvious distress, the sweat on her forehead, the way she was gripping Jennifer's hand, and made an instant decision about how to proceed. "I see," Victoria said thoughtfully. "Miss, I understand you're experiencing some discomfort, but we do have established protocols that protect both our patients and our practice from insurance complications that could delay or compromise care." "She's having contractions," Jennifer exclaimed. "Real contractions, she's in labor." Victoria's smile was perfectly professional and completely devoid of warmth. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern for your friend, but as a licensed medical professional, I can assure you that what appears to be labor to untrained observers can often be false labor, Braxton Hicks contractions, or even anxiety-related symptoms." "Anxiety-related symptoms?" The retired nurse stood up, her voice shaking with outrage. "I worked in labor and delivery for 30 years, and that woman is in active labor." With all due respect, Victoria replied smoothly, unless you're currently credentialed at this facility, I'm afraid your opinion doesn't carry medical weight in our decision-making process. Another contraction gripped Amira, and this time her cry of pain was accompanied by something else, the unmistakable sound of her water breaking. The gush of clear amniotic fluid soaked through her maternity pants and began pooling on the expensive marble floor. The waiting room erupted into chaos. Patients were jumping to their feet, some reaching for their phones to call for help, others demanding that the clinic staff provide immediate assistance. The retired nurse was trying to help Amira into a more comfortable position while Jennifer held her hand and offered words of encouragement. "My water just broke," Amira gasped between contractions, her voice filled with a mixture of pain and terror. "The baby is coming. Please, I need help right now." Victoria looked down at the amniotic fluid spreading across her pristine marble floor, and for just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped completely. The expression on her face wasn't medical concern for a patient whose membranes had ruptured, it was pure revulsion at the mess being made in her upscale facility. "Claire, call maintenance immediately," Victoria said quietly, then louder, "Ma'am, you're creating a biohazard situation in our reception area. This is completely unacceptable, unacceptable." Sarah was now live streaming the entire scene, her phone capturing Victoria's callous response to a woman in active labor. "What's unacceptable is your complete lack of basic human decency. Ma'am, if you don't stop recording immediately, I'll have security escort you from the premises," Victoria threatened. "Go ahead and call security," Sarah replied, addressing her phone camera as much as Victoria. "Let everyone see Harbor Women's Health call security on patients who are documenting them refusing care to a woman in labor." The live stream was already gaining viewers as people shared the shocking video across social media platforms. Comments were pouring in expressing outrage and disbelief at what they were witnessing. "This woman's water just broke, and you're worried about your floor," Jennifer demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. "What kind of medical professionals are you?" Victoria's response revealed the cold calculation that had always lurked beneath her professional facade. "This is an outpatient clinic, not an emergency room. If this is truly a medical emergency, she should have gone to an appropriate facility that's equipped for emergency obstetric care. She had an appointment here. She's been a patient here throughout her pregnancy. She had an appointment that required proper insurance verification," Victoria corrected smoothly. "Without that verification, we cannot assume responsibility for emergency care that could result in significant financial exposure for both the patient and the practice." The crowd of patients was becoming increasingly agitated and vocal in their criticism. Several people were now recording the scene with their phones, and Sarah's live stream audience had grown to several thousand viewers as the video spread rapidly across social media platforms. "I'm calling security," Victoria announced, reaching for the phone behind the reception desk with practiced authority. "Perfect," Sarah said directly to her camera. "Let everyone watch Harbor Women's Health call security on a woman whose water just broke rather than provide the medical care she desperately needs." The live stream comments were moving so fast they were impossible to read individually, but the sentiment was clear: outrage, demands for justice, calls for investigations, and an overwhelming sense that something fundamentally evil was being exposed in real time. Marcus Williams, the 45-year-old security guard, received Victoria's urgent call while completing his afternoon rounds in the parking structure. When he entered the waiting room and took in the scene before him, a pregnant woman in obvious distress with amniotic fluid on the floor, an angry crowd of witnesses with phones recording everything, and medical staff standing with their arms crossed in defiance. His heart sank with the weight of what he was being asked to do. "Marcus, this individual is refusing to follow clinic policies and has created a significant sanitation emergency," Victoria said with cold professional authority. "She needs to be escorted from the premises immediately for the safety and comfort of our other patients." Marcus looked at Amira, who was now leaning heavily against Jennifer and the retired nurse for support as another contraction gripped her body. He had 2 daughters of his own and had been present for both births. What he was seeing was a woman in active labor being denied basic human compassion by people who had taken sacred oaths to heal and help. "Ma'am, what's your situation?" Marcus asked Amira gently, his voice filled with genuine concern and respect. "My baby is coming," Amira gasped through tears of pain and humiliation. "My water broke and they won't help me because I can't pay $3,000 cash right now." Marcus looked at Victoria and Claire with undisguised disgust and disbelief. In his 3 years working security at the clinic, he had never been asked to remove someone who was clearly having a medical emergency, especially a pregnant woman in active labor. "You want me to remove a woman whose water just broke and who's having contractions? She's not a patient," Victoria said firmly, as if stating it could somehow make it true. "She's an individual who came here without proper payment authorization and is now disrupting our facility, creating health hazards, and disturbing our legitimate patients." "She's a woman in labor," Marcus replied quietly but with absolute firmness, "and I'm not removing her. I'm calling 911 to get her the help she needs and deserves. If you make that call, you're fired effective immediately," Victoria threatened, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal the cold, calculating person beneath. "And I'll make sure you never work in healthcare security again anywhere in this city." "Then fire me," Marcus replied without a moment's hesitation, pulling out his personal cell phone. "Some things are more important than a job, and helping a woman bring her baby safely into this world is definitely one of those things." As Marcus began dialing emergency services, the tension in the waiting room reached a crescendo. Patients were shouting at the clinic staff, multiple phones were recording from different angles, and Sarah's live stream had reached viral status with viewers sharing it across every social media platform imaginable. The waiting room doors suddenly burst open with dramatic force, and Darius Johnson strode in like a man on a mission. As the CEO of Johnson Strategic Consulting, Darius was accustomed to managing crises and commanding rooms full of powerful people, but nothing had prepared him for the fury and terror he felt when his assistant had shown him the viral video of his wife being denied care. He had been in the middle of the most important board meeting of his career when his assistant Sarah had burst into the conference room, her face pale with shock. "Mr. Johnson, you need to see this right now. It's about your wife." Without waiting for permission, she had connected her phone to the room's display screen, and the entire board had watched in stunned silence as the livestream showed Amira in labor being refused care while clinic staff stood by with crossed arms. Darius had said exactly 3 words, "Meeting is over," before grabbing his keys and sprinting from the building. He had driven across the city like a man possessed, ignoring traffic lights, taking every shortcut he knew and calling ahead to clear his path through the clinic's parking garage. "Amira," he called out as he crossed the marble floor in long, purposeful strides, his expensive suit slightly wrinkled from his frantic journey across the city. "Darius, thank God you're here," Amira sobbed with relief, leaning into her husband's strong embrace while another contraction gripped her body. "They won't help me. The baby's coming and they won't help me because they say I'm faking it for attention." Darius looked around the chaotic waiting room, taking in the phones recording everything, the amniotic fluid on the floor, his wife in obvious active labor, and the hostile faces of the clinic staff who were treating this as an administrative inconvenience rather than a medical emergency. "Who's in charge here?" Darius asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm from nothing and was accustomed to getting immediate answers. Victoria stepped forward, recognizing both an opportunity and a threat. This was clearly a man of substance and influence, someone who could either be managed or could cause serious problems for the clinic. She decided to attempt damage control while maintaining her position. "Sir, I'm Victoria Thompson, the head nurse and clinical coordinator. I understand this situation appears confusing, but your wife came here today without proper insurance verification, and we have strict protocols that protect both patients and the practice from potential complications." "My wife has insurance," Darius said, his voice deadly calm in the way that experienced negotiators recognize as the most dangerous tone possible. "She has pre-authorization that was confirmed yesterday. She has a standing appointment that she's kept religiously throughout her pregnancy. And right now she's in active labor with ruptured membranes while you're standing here talking about paperwork. Sir, I understand your frustration, but unverified government insurance requires immediate payment to protect both the patient and the practice from potential coverage denials." Claire interjected, faithfully parroting the script Victoria had drilled into her. "Government insurance?" Darius's voice carried an edge that made several people in the room take an unconscious step backward. "Are you referring to the Medicaid coverage that's been verified, authorized, and confirmed by both your office and the insurance provider?" That verification appears to have some irregularities, Victoria said smoothly, trying to maintain her professional composure while recognizing that she was dealing with someone who wouldn't be easily intimidated or dismissed. In such cases, we require immediate payment of $3,000 to proceed with care. Darius stared at both women for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed what they were telling him. The livestream audience was now approaching 50,000 viewers, and the comment section was exploding with outrage and demands for justice. $3,000, Darius repeated slowly as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. You want $3,000 cash from a woman in active labor before you'll provide medical care. It's standard policy for unverified insurance cases, Victoria replied, but her voice was beginning to waver slightly as she realized that her usual tactics weren't working on this particular opponent. Darius reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet with deliberate slowness. He removed his platinum American Express card and placed it on the reception desk with such force that it made both Claire and Victoria jump. "There's your payment," he said, his voice carrying ice-cold fury. "Run it for $5,000, run it for $10,000. Hell, run it for the entire cost of this building if that's what it takes. Now get my wife the medical care she needs and deserves." "Sir, I'm afraid we don't accept credit cards for unverified insurance cases," Victoria said, but her voice now carried a note of uncertainty as she realized that her carefully constructed policies were about to be exposed as the discriminatory tools they really were. "Then what exactly do you accept?" Darius asked, his voice rising for the first time since entering the clinic. "Because my wife's baby is coming right here, right now on your marble floor while you people play games with policies that seem to change depending on the color of the patient's skin." The accusation hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. The word that everyone had been thinking but no one had been willing to say directly, racism, was now out in the open, impossible to ignore or dismiss. "How dare you accuse us of discrimination?" Victoria protested, but her voice lacked conviction and carried the tone of someone who knew she had been caught. "We're licensed medical professionals following established protocols that apply equally to all patients. Protocols that somehow only seem to apply to patients who look like my wife." Darius shot back. "Protocols that require cash payment from women in labor while white patients with identical insurance are treated immediately." "Sir, you're making very serious accusations that are completely unfounded," Victoria replied, but she was clearly struggling to maintain her composure as the livestream audience grew larger and her discrimination was being broadcast to tens of thousands of people. Dr. Richard Sloan chose that exact moment to emerge from his private office, drawn by the commotion that shattered the illusion of calm professionalism his clinic was famous for. For decades, Harbor Women's Health had been his pride, a place he'd built with integrity, patient care and prestige. But the scene unfolding before him was chaos, shouting, phones recording, and a woman in labor on his marble floor. "What in God's name is happening in my clinic? Doctor?" Sloane's voice carried the authority of 62 years of medical discipline but also genuine panic at the disorder before him. "Dr. Sloan," Darius said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, his posture powerful, his presence commanding. "Your staff has refused to provide emergency medical care to my wife, who is clearly in active labor with ruptured membranes." Sloan turned to him, ready to issue a firm response, but froze. There was something familiar about the man's face. He'd seen it before. On magazine covers, in business journals, on CNN's leadership panels. Darius Johnson. The name hit him like a jolt of electricity. The founder and CEO of Johnson Strategic Consulting, one of the country's most respected equity advisory firms. A man who testified before Congress about corporate discrimination and social responsibility. "Oh my God," Sloan whispered under his breath. He suddenly realized what this meant. This wasn't just a patient's husband. This was a national figure, a man with the power, platform and influence to destroy Harbor Women's Health with a single statement. And judging by the fire in his eyes, Darius intended to do exactly that. Victoria noticed Sloane's expression falter and tried to seize control of the narrative. "Dr. Sloan, we were only following standard insurance verification protocols, standard protocols." Darius's tone cut through the room like a blade. "You mean refusing medical care to a pregnant woman because her insurance card doesn't impress you?" Sloane's eyes darted between them. His pulse quickened. He could feel the air tightening, the world watching through the dozens of phones filming every second. "Is this true?" he demanded, voice trembling between outrage and disbelief. Victoria stammered. "We were just protecting the clinic from potential liability," Sloan snapped, the physician in him taking over. "Protecting it from what?" from treating a woman in labor, from basic decency. Darius stepped closer, his voice calm but lethal. Dr. Sloan, I've built my career advising corporations on ethics, accountability and public trust. Let me make this clear, what I just witnessed here isn't a policy failure, it's a moral collapse. His words hit like a courtroom verdict. Claire lowered her gaze, Victoria's face went pale. What protocols, Sloan demanded sharply, require refusing emergency obstetric care to a woman in pain? Neither sister spoke, the silence confirmed everything. Sloan's stomach turned. His trusted staff, the people he'd personally hired and mentored, had turned his clinic into a fortress of discrimination under his own roof. Darius's jaw tightened, but he forced his voice to stay measured. Dr. Sloan, my wife doesn't need another apology, she needs care, now. That broke the paralysis. Sloan nodded rapidly. Mrs. Johnson, he said, voice thick with remorse, let's get you immediate medical attention. This is unacceptable. I promise you, it ends now. He personally guided Amira toward the examination rooms. The crowd parted in silence, the weight of guilt and revelation heavy in the air. Cameras followed every step. Amira, weak but resolute, turned her head slightly toward Victoria and Claire. Her face was pale from exhaustion, but her voice carried quiet power. Everyone saw what you did, she whispered. The whole world is watching, and they'll remember. Darius followed beside her, one hand steadying her back, the other clenched tightly at his side, a man burning with purpose. Within hours, the livestream had gone viral. #Justice for Amira was trending in 20 countries. CNN replayed the footage with the headline, Woman in Labor Denied Care, CEO USB and Demands Justice. By midnight, every major outlet had picked up the story. Civil rights lawyers called for federal investigations. Politicians issued statements. Hospitals across the country began scrambling to review their own practices. Dr. Sloan's first priority was Amira. Under his direct care, she safely delivered a healthy 7-pound baby girl 3 hours later. But when he stepped out of the delivery suite, his second priority hit him like a storm. Damage control. Except there was no controlling this damage. By sunrise, Darius Johnson's public statement had gone viral too. My wife was denied care not because of policy, but because of prejudice. What happened at Harbor Women's Health is bigger than one family. It's a mirror America can no longer look away from. The fallout was immediate. Appointment cancellations flooded in. Federal investigators arrived within 48 hours. Harbor Women's Health, once a symbol of prestige, became the epicenter of the biggest healthcare discrimination scandal in decades. Dr. Sloan sat alone in his office, watching the viral video again. This time, seeing not chaos, but conviction in Darius's eyes. The man hadn't shouted, hadn't ranted, he had simply stood his ground, calm and unbreakable. Sloan understood now. Darius wasn't just fighting for his wife, he was fighting for justice itself, and that realization terrified him. But also, for the first time in years, made him want to do what was right. The walls of Harbor Women's Health felt heavier than ever. The chandeliers that once sparkled like hope now hung over an air thick with shame. The marble floors that had mirrored luxury now reflected nothing but scandal. Dr. Richard Sloan sat behind his mahogany desk, hands clasped tight, jaw set. The viral storm had reached every major network in the country. He hadn't slept since the video of Amira Johnson giving birth on his clinic's lobby floor went viral. The door opened. Victoria Thompson walked in first, posture stiff, eyes still holding the confidence of a woman used to being obeyed. Behind her trailed Claire, pale, shaken, mascara smudged, the weight of her sister's manipulation finally pressing on her conscience. Darius Johnson stood silently by the window. He'd insisted on being there. Dr. Sloan had agreed. After all, Darius wasn't just a husband anymore. He was the face of the movement, the man whose rage had given a voice to millions of black fathers across America. Dr. Sloan's tone was calm but razor sharp. Sit down. Victoria lowered herself into the leather chair, trying to maintain her practiced poise. Claire followed hesitantly, avoiding her sister's glare. Darius didn't sit. He crossed his arms, the quiet fury in his eyes cutting deeper than any shouted word. Let's be clear, Dr. Sloan began, opening his laptop and turning the screen toward them. I've watched the entire live stream, all 1 hour and 42 minutes of it. Every second of humiliation, every word of cruelty, every moment you refused to help a woman in labor. Victoria tried to interject. Dr. Sloan, with all due respect, this is being misinterpreted. Misinterpreted? Darius cut in, his voice low but thunderous in its control. My wife's water broke on your floor while your staff debated whether she was acting. That's not a misunderstanding, Miss Thompson, that's cruelty. Victoria's jaw tightened. We were following protocol. Protocol. Darius stepped closer, his voice rising. You think protocol justifies letting a black woman scream in pain while you roll your eyes about a biohazard? You think paperwork excuses racism? Claire flinched. Victoria didn't. She straightened, chin high. Mr. Johnson, I understand you're upset, but this clinic runs on order and accountability. Medicaid cases. Darius slammed his palm on the desk. The sound cracked through the room. Say her name, he demanded. Amira Johnson. Say her name, not Medicaid case. That's my wife, a human being, a mother, a taxpayer. She's not a line item on your spreadsheet. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dr. Sloan leaned forward, his voice was trembling, not from anger but from disgust. What I witnessed on that video violated every principle I've ever stood for as a physician. Harbor Women's Health was built to care for women. You turned it into a gatekeeping machine. Victoria's smile faltered. Doctor, perhaps you're overreacting. He cut her off. Overreacting. I watched a woman's water break while you called maintenance instead of a nurse. You referred to her as a biohazard. Do you even understand how monstrous that is? Victoria's confidence began to crumble. Her usual manipulation, the polished tone, the professional phrasing, no longer worked. For once she was cornered. Darius leaned on the desk, locking eyes with her. My wife almost lost her baby because of you. My daughter could have died in your lobby while you decided who was worthy of care. His voice cracked slightly, but he steadied himself. I've spent my life fighting bias in boardrooms, trying to change policies that never seem to touch real lives, but now it's personal. You didn't just humiliate my wife, you nearly broke something inside her. You stole her dignity and called it procedure. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, almost inaudibly, he's right. Victoria turned sharply. Don't start, Claire. But Claire couldn't stop now. The guilt had been growing for months, and Darius's words had pierced straight through her fear. You told me to do it, Claire said, voice trembling but resolute. You told me to create obstacles. You trained me to delay patients you didn't want here. Dr. Sloan froze. Explain that. Claire's hands shook as she reached into her bag. She pulled out her phone and unlocked it. I recorded everything. Every staff meeting. Every message. Victoria's head snapped toward her. You what? I had to. Claire said through tears. You said it was business, but I knew it was wrong. I knew one day it would come back to us. Darius looked between them, the perfect image of power corrupted and guilt unraveling. Play it, he said simply. Claire tapped on her phone. The audio filled the office. Claire, we're getting too many Medicaid patients. It's hurting our brand. Use verification delays, require cash deposits, whatever it takes. Make it hard enough that they'll go somewhere else. We're not a welfare clinic. The voice was unmistakable. Victoria's. Dr. Sloan leaned back, pale with disbelief. Dear God, he whispered. Darius's expression didn't change. His silence was louder than shouting. Play the next one, he said. Claire hesitated, but pressed play. Remember, when these people get loud, hold your ground. Tell them you're following protocol. If they cause a scene, security will handle it. Eventually they'll realize this isn't their kind of place. The word these hit the air like poison. Dr. Sloan looked at Victoria, as if seeing her for the first time. These people, he repeated slowly. You meant Black and Hispanic patients. Victoria tried one final pivot, her tone turning icy. Doctor, you're misunderstanding context. I was referring to disruptive patients. Stop lying, Claire burst out. You told me exactly who to target. You said you'll know them when you see them. Victoria's professional mask cracked. You're twisting my words. No, Darius said coldly. She's revealing who you are. For the first time, Victoria faltered. She looked small, not powerful, not composed. Just a frightened woman, exposed by her own arrogance. Dr. Sloan stood, closing the laptop with finality. Both of you are terminated immediately. Effective now. What you've done isn't administration, it's institutional racism. Victoria tried to regain footing. Doctor, we can handle this internally. Darius cut her off, voice booming with controlled fury. You think this is internal? The Department of Justice is already investigating. CNN, NBC, every outlet in the country is watching. You didn't just break ethics, you broke America's trust in its healthcare system. The weight of his words silenced even the sound of traffic outside. Dr. Sloane's tone hardened. Security will escort you both out. Contact your attorneys. You'll need them. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but the door opened first. Marcus Williams, the same security guard who had refused to drag Amira out, stepped inside. His broad frame filled the doorway. His eyes met Darius's for a brief wordless exchange of mutual respect. Mr. Johnson, Marcus said quietly, you've got more people behind you than you realize. Darius nodded once. So do you, brother. As Marcus escorted the Thompson sisters out, the hallway erupted with flashing cameras. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones stretched forward. Claire kept her head down, tears streaming. Victoria lifted her chin, still pretending control, but her face, once polished and unreadable, was now the face of a woman stripped of power. 14 months later, the nation watched as the courtroom filled with press. The trial of United States v. Victoria Thompson and Claire Thompson became one of the most closely followed civil rights cases of the decade. Darius sat beside Amira at the prosecution's table, hand clasped tightly in hers. The courtroom buzzed with reporters, advocates, and everyday citizens who had followed their story from that viral video to this moment of reckoning. Jessica Martinez, the Johnsons' attorney, stood before the jury. This case, she began, is not about one bad day or one bad decision. It's about a deliberate system of discrimination, a policy of exclusion masked as professionalism. She gestured toward the defendants. These women didn't make a mistake, they made a plan. The jury listened as audio recording after audio recording filled the courtroom, each more damning than the last. Emails titled Patient Demographics Management, text threads discussing undesirable insurance profiles. Claire's voice trembling as she admitted on the stand, I followed orders. Victoria trained me to delay Black and Hispanic patients. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid to lose my job. When Darius took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. He looked directly at the jury. I'm not here as a CEO or an activist, he said. I'm here as a husband. I watched my wife, the woman who built her life around faith, kindness and responsibility, collapse on a clinic floor, while people with power decided she wasn't worth helping. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. That's not just racism. That's moral rot. When he finished, even the judge looked shaken. The verdict came after just 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Victoria received 4 years in federal prison. Claire received 2 for cooperation. The Johnson civil suit followed. The jury awarded them $6.3 million, a figure that symbolized not just compensation, but validation. Outside the courthouse, Darius spoke to the crowd of reporters gathered behind the metal barricades. This isn't just about my family, he said. It's about every woman who was told to wait, every mother made to feel small, every father who watched his loved one be dismissed. Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration. And today America took one step closer to it. Detroit's summer afternoon. The building that once bore the name Harbor Women's Health now stood reborn as the Johnson Community Health Center. Its glass doors were open to everyone, insured or not. The waiting room bustled with life. A mural stretched across one wall, painted by local artists, a mother holding her newborn beneath the words "Dignity Heals." Marcus Williams, now Director of Patient Advocacy, greeted each visitor with a warm smile and the same words he'd spoken 5 years earlier. You're safe here, Doctor. Sloane, older now, but still sharp, walked the halls in humble awe. He'd sold everything after the scandal, using the proceeds to create the Sloane Foundation for Healthcare Equity. He never sought redemption through words, only through work. Amira walked in wearing a soft blue dress, holding the hand of a 5-year-old girl with curious eyes, her daughter, Hope. Darius followed, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He placed them on a small memorial near the lobby entrance, a plaque engraved with "For every mother who was told to wait." Reporters had gathered once again, this time not for scandal, but for celebration. Amira was scheduled to give the keynote address at the American Medical Association's national conference that evening. Under the warm spotlight, Amira stood at the podium, facing a sea of physicians, nurses, and students. Darius sat in the front row, his eyes locked on her, proud, protective, reverent. When my water broke on a clinic floor 5 years ago, she began softly, I thought my story was ending. I thought my daughter would be born into a world that saw her mother as less than human. She paused, letting the silence breathe, but I was wrong. That moment didn't end my story, it started one. Because people refused to look away. The crowd hung on every word. Jennifer, a stranger, stood up when others stayed silent. Sarah recorded the truth when lies filled the air. Marcus refused to follow an order that violated his conscience. Dr. Sloan took responsibility, instead of hiding behind policy. And my husband, she looked at Darius, his eyes glistened. My husband never stopped fighting. He turned pain into purpose. He made sure no one could rewrite what happened to us. The audience erupted in applause. Amira smiled through her tears. Hope, my daughter, was born from injustice, but she's growing up surrounded by change. Because every person here today has the power to choose decency over denial, empathy over ego, humanity over hate. Her tone grew firmer. Every patient who walks through your doors carries a lifetime of hope. Your job isn't just to treat bodies, it's to honor souls. That's what medicine was meant to be. When she finished, the room rose as one. The standing ovation lasted 10 full minutes. Darius joined her on stage, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Hope ran to them, laughing, unaware that her very existence had once been a national reckoning. As the applause thundered, Darius leaned toward Amira and whispered, "You did it, baby, you made them see." Amira smiled through her tears. "No," she said softly, "we did." The screen faded to black, her voice lingering like a heartbeat. Justice begins when love refuses to be silent.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.